All right, with me today we have Neil Patel, the man probably needs no introduction. New York Times bestseller, Wall Street Journal has called him one of the top influencers today. Neil, thanks for joining me on this podcast. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so first question, in your opinion, what's the hardest part about growing a company from 0 to 1 million?
So I don't think it's 0 to 1 million is the hardest part. It's getting from not even 1 to 5. It's getting above 10 and continually growing. And I think the reason why most people don't get from 0 to 1, just being quite upfront, is they don't know how to get the audience. See, because even if you have a small TAM, 1 isn't the biggest and hardest number to get to. It's getting above that, right? And the big issue that we see is people just don't have the audience. Like, if you build an audience, you get a big email list, you push on the marketing, you can get there even with a crap product and high churn.
So there was a time when you didn't have an audience though. So let's go back in time. This is what I want to talk with you about.
Yeah.
Um, Tell me about the first company that you started. What was the idea behind it? What was the motivation? What was it? Um, let's start there, and then I have a couple more questions.
Sure. First company or first software company?
Up to you.
So first company really started was an ad agency called ACS. It got over 1 million in ARR. I didn't have a brand, no one knew who I was. I grinded it out. Go to conferences, speaking. Got turned down for most speaking gigs, but speaking, conferences. There really wasn't podcasting, so there was no interviews and stuff like that. Um,
So
you know,
that's
cold calling, like just literally, I grinded it out.
let's pause there. So tons of hustle, tons of motivation. Where did that motivation come from for you personally? You're a successful entrepreneur today, but Neil, there was a day when, you were starting at zero.
Yeah,
Like you had to just grind it out. Like, how did you fall into entrepreneurship? Like, how did you know this was your calling in a sense?
I didn't. I just wanted money. See, I started the ad agency when I was picking up trash and cleaning restrooms. I want to do anything other than that.
I can actually kind of relate to that. I started my first company in college, and I was flat broke, and I knew I wasn't going to get a good job paying enough, so that motivated me a lot. What, in your opinion, what are the biggest mistakes you made, like when growing to 1 million, or maybe even if you can go back and talk about certain things in those like early days, like what would it be?
The big mistake growing to 1 million. There's not really one mistake. I would say there's a lot of little things, like didn't focus enough, left my eye off the ball and tried to do too many things. Because if I focused, I would have got there quicker. Another thing that I did was not pick a big enough TAM. The bigger your TAM, the easier it is to get to 1 million. The next thing I didn't do correctly is pick an industry that inherently has low churn. One way to get more customers, one way to get more revenue is get more customers. Another way is to keep them longer. Some industries just naturally have more churn. So it's like those are some of the mistakes that I made early on. Um, the big thing though that I always tell people is push really hard on the marketing and push hard on the marketing even before your product is launched. Create that buzz. Because if you can get that buzz and brand awareness, it's much easier and quicker to get 10 million.
How many businesses have you built to over 1 million revenue?
I don't know a lot. Like
I know. I didn't know which one to
five or
even like talk
six.
about.
There's probably more, but I can count at least 5 or 6.
Let's focus on like one. Let's focus on like the hardest one.
All the ones earlier in my career were harder because I made more mistakes.
Okay, if
So
you had to pick one, maybe it's Crazy Egg, maybe it's Hello Bar.
the hardest one was the most recent one called Uber Suggest. It wasn't hard to get to 1 million. My goal wasn't to make money. It's still not to make money. It's to break even. I burned so much money over 3 years. That one was tough because I was losing a lot of cash. It really wasn't hard to get to 1 million because you just start charging. Um, if I were to say the hardest one to get to 1 million was my ad agency, ACS. and that was my first company, and I made the most mistakes, and I was just grinding it out, calling on the phone. I had no money, doing a ton of cold calling, and eventually I got the business to grow by just picking up the phone and dialing.
Nice. And so when you talk about those mistakes, if you could go back in time and tell yourself anything, what would that be? Would it be to focus, double down on a certain sort of, go to market strategy? Would it be to, you mentioned focus being super important. If you can go back and tell yourself something, as you're, just getting things off the ground, what would it be?
Um, hmm. You know, it's tough because I wouldn't tell myself one thing. Like if I had to go back in time, the biggest thing I would tell myself, well, actually, if I had to pick one thing, the biggest thing I would tell myself is to only do that business. See, my problem was is when my ad agency started working out and I started climbing in revenue, even like the first 30, 40, 50 grand a month, I was like, oh, I'm starting to make some money now. I can go do this other thing. Go create this other software. Go expand here. And it's just like, why? I should have just focused and made it grow bigger and bigger. And as it got to a few million, I was like, oh, I should go do a lot more stuff. Why? There's ad agencies out there that make hundreds of millions, if not billions a year. Why didn't I just focus and just keep doing that and just try to go big or go home?
Yeah, I see that with a lot of entrepreneurs, and I kind of have that myself where, it's fun to make products, but focus is key. So thinking about, where you are today and how you think about building businesses with all your experience, how have you kind of changed your approach? Are you just hyper focused on building your agency right now? Are you really, cutting down focus on some of your other products? Like, how are you thinking about, where you want to head, say, in 5 years based on, all the mistakes maybe you made in the past and all like the learnings?
I'm hyper focused on my agency, yes. That was, I think that's a huge key that's really helped me over the years. And
Nice.
because I just made that mistake so many times, I know not to do anything else.
And now that you have a big audience, it's obviously really easy to launch new products. Would you agree with that?
That's what everyone thinks. It's easy to launch and get people to see it. Doesn't mean they'll pay for anything.
So here's a question. So let's say, you're starting over again. You're at ground zero. You have no audience. You have no capital. How would you go about building that business? How would you go about marketing that business? That's a hard question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on like, given everything you know today, but you don't have the audience, you don't have the capital, you don't even have the team. Where would you start, and what would that look like?
I would go omni-channel. I would start with paying for ads. I would try guest posting. I would try content marketing. I would speak at events, whether it's virtual or in person. I would try to do biz dev partnerships. It's actually one of the quickest ways to grow. How do you push your people to someone else and vice versa? But I would start in those areas and see what happens and go from there.
Nice. And then when you think about like your first like 2 years of entrepreneurship, there's always those moments where you have like those big breaks. Is there any that comes to mind where you kind of look back and you're like, that was huge, that was awesome? Maybe it was like your first article in TechCrunch. Maybe it was your first big speaking gig. Like, is there one moment that you feel, kind of changed the trajectory of your career forever?
Not one bit. I think it was a lot of little things that add up. There's usually not one thing that most people do that change the trajectory of their career and make them successful. There's a lot of little things that add up. There's
Yeah,
no silver bullet in most cases.
I agree with that. So to kind of wrap things up, there's a lot of entrepreneurs building startups more than ever today. If you had to give them any advice, just again, based on everything throughout your career and all the experience you have, what would you tell them not to do, not to focus on? What's maybe something you see entrepreneurs making mistakes where?
The biggest mistake when they're starting off, they're picking too small TAMs.
How do you think about the markets that you go after? How do you calculate TAM?
I look for people who are in the space. I try to find publicly traded companies with large market caps look for a lot of search queries, look for a lot of high-paying customers. I'm looking for all the things that you would need to know for sure that the market can make you a lot of money.
Do you start by looking at, let's say, search terms that, building products that people are already searching for, and then
Correct.
building businesses around that because there's already somewhat of a demand in place instead of creating demand, essentially?
Yes, I look for search terms. I look for people looking for solutions. I look for archaic competitors who have a shitty product or a shitty service. Looking for people who are making money hand over fist. Because, look, it doesn't mean I'll beat them. It just means that I can take a slice of the pie.
Yeah. So you're not going after being number one, number two, or number three. Are you saying you're okay being number four, number five, number six?
I can be last on the table. All I care, as long as the pie is big enough and I'm getting a big enough piece, I don't care.
I think that's really good advice because a lot of entrepreneurs enter markets and sometimes they're discouraged when they see there's a lot of competition. But you're saying that doesn't scare you. That shows you
There's
there's a
none.
lot of opportunity.
More competitors, more money.
That's wise words. Um, I guess, any entrepreneurs you look up to?
I look up to the crazy ones, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but like the people like the Elon Musk, the Larry Ellison, the Bill Gates of the world. Not because they're rich or anything like that, but they're just not doing business the normal way, right? Like Bill Gates doesn't understand the concept of losing. Like if you think about him like trying to cure malaria and get rid of it altogether. I don't know if you saw the documentary on him. Or
I saw
Elon.
that. He called out COVID on a TED talk and now it's smart guy. Obviously he's successful for a reason.
And then you look at Elon Musk, he'll say shit that people disagree with, or he'll say remarks that could cause his stock to go down. But like the guy just thinks super big, right? You look at Larry Ellison, he grew really quickly, or Oracle, through acquisitions. And back then people weren't making acquisitions. It's like these are people who thought outside the box to grow.
Awesome. What's your favorite business book?
Principles by Ray Dalio. It's valuable even if you're not in business.
I have it right here. I love that book.
You know, there's a free version of it, right? I think there's still a free version. There used to be.
I like to hold the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm the same way. I have a physical copy, but most people are like, I don't want to buy the book. I'm like, he did something unique in which I think he was just trying to give away the book because he kind of doesn't need the money, right? So,
Yeah, he's a smart guy. He's running a big hedge fund.
what's your
Um,
favorite book?
what's my favorite book?
Yeah, out of curiosity.
I really like this book called Strategic Entrepreneurialism. That's literally the name, Strategic Entrepreneurism. It's a book about how to build companies with the goal of being acquired. It's pretty good. It's by John Fisher. You should check it out. Either that or Impossible to Inevitable by Aaron Ross and Jason Lumpkin.
See, I don't think about ever selling a company. I'm just like, look, you build it, whatever happens, happens. I don't really care if it sells or not.
That's a smart way to go.
Because it's really
Um,
hard to sell, right? Like you can't guarantee that, or if you get a buyer once they don't offer the right price. There's just so many variables, and then you sell a business, and then you got to go do something else. Was the money enough? How much did you pay in taxes? Like it's just like, you know what? You're just better off in most cases, not all, but in most cases, unless people give you some stupid offer. I would just go out there and just continue running a business and grind it out.
that's good advice. All right, last question. What do you like to do for fun? What's something interesting people might not know about you?
I walk a lot. I walk with my daughter, my wife, sometimes twice a day. But that's fun for us.
Awesome. Well, Neil, thanks so much for coming on this podcast. Definitely appreciate it. Where could people find you if they want to learn more about you?
NeilPatel.com.
All right, you heard it. Neil, thanks for coming on this podcast. It's been a pleasure, and maybe we'll have you back on in 5 years when you got this empire in front of you.
Sounds good.
All right, cheers, bud.